My dad used to call him Shirley. He liked that. I would always look over, and you know how Ed was dressed. He wore those women's cuffs, an Angora sweater. I once said to him, Ed, if you could have anything in life, what would you be? He said, I would come back as a blonde. A woman blonde. Ed would just smile and say, that's the real me. Greetings, my friends. We are all interested in the future, but sometimes we need to take a look back to the past to better understand the path ahead. And tonight we'll be taking a time-traveling journey back to 1953, where we'll be discussing a film called Glen or Glenda. The film is sort of like a snapshot of our past beliefs preserved in amber for all of us to cringe at. But the film has more to offer than just historical insight. I believe that Glen or Glenda it's gonna live forever because of its glorious camp and its surreal flights of fancy.
Hold the string! Hold the string!
It's a film, mind you, that features Bela Lugosi, Dracula himself, as a puppeteer god who speaks only in cryptic riddles and children's rhymes.
Beware of the big green dragon that sits on your doorstep. He eats little boys.
So, you may be wondering, why are we talking about this old movie? Is Glen or Glenda even good? And those are two questions I'll be answering in this video. Maybe. The film was written and directed by Ed Wood, who has an unfair reputation of being the worst director of all time. Like Glen from the film, Wood was also a crossdresser, and when dressed in those clothes which give the most comfort, Wood went by the name of Shirley. Wood would go out in public as Shirley, makeup, Angora, and all. Wood's cross-dressing would become the basis for Glen or Glenda, a film that Wood wrote, directed, and starred in. The production originally came about because a B-movie producer named George Weiss was looking to capitalize on the media attention surrounding Christine Jorgensen, the first trans person to become famous in the US of A. She had recently undergone gender reassignment surgery, and naturally, the cis were utterly mystified. How was such sorcery possible? Weiss saw the interest in Jorgensen, smelled money, and went out looking for a director to adapt her story. Just her story. But then Ed Wood comes along and he makes it a film about two characters. One of them is a trans woman based on Jorgensen who's named Anne, and the other is a crossdresser played by none other than Ed Wood himself.
This person is a transvestite, a man who is more comfortable wearing girls' clothes. Glen is engaged to be married to Barbara, a lovely, intelligent girl. The problem? Glenda, Glen's other self.
Glen wants to get married to Barbara, a woman he loves deeply, and he feels he must reveal to her the secret of his cross-dressing, but understandably, he's afraid to tell her.
Glen, is it another woman?
That's Barbara, Glen's girlfriend in the film, played by Dolores Fuller. Fuller was actually Wood's girlfriend in real life, and she only found out about Wood's cross-dressing halfway through making the film. Life doesn't always have happy endings like the movies, and Fuller eventually left Wood because of his cross-dressing. She went on to say, I loved him in a way, but I couldn't handle the transvestism. I'm a very normal person. It's hard for me to deviate. Hard to deviate. You know, there's this stigma against cross-dressing, mostly because of the misconception that it's something that only sexual deviants do. And, yeah, Wood was known to say that there's nothing more sensual than Angora. But he seemed to cross-dress primarily because it was comforting.
Give this man satin undies, a dress, a sweater, and a skirt, and he's the happiest individual in the world. He can work better, think better, he can play better, and he can be more of a credit to his community and his government because he is happy. These things are his comfort.
Wood would do everyday tasks dressed in Angora, going about life as Shirley. And this suggests to me that the cross-dressing, it's more than a fetish. This is core to his identity. I mean, he chose cross-dressing over relationships with the women he loved. Okay, and I guess what I should say is he chose cross-dressing over a compromised life. A life with women who would never understand him, and a life where his beloved Angora would be packed away in a box, gathering dust. Wood's need to wear those forbidden clothes lead to the most poetic moments in the film, like the shot of a lonely dress in an empty room, or the shot where Glenda looks longingly at the plastic, lifeless mannequin and sees her own reflection in the window.
My mind's in a muddle, like in a thick fog. I can't make sense to myself sometimes. I thought I could stop wearing these things. I tried, honestly, I tried.
But why was Wood's Angora forbidden in the first place? Well, cross-dressing was seen as a fetish, as people assumed it was something that only gay men did. Back then, and let's be real, even today, gayness was seen as a perversion rather than an aspect of someone's being. Wood's friends would rush to point out that Ed's not a homo, he just likes to wear women's clothes. I mean, Lugosi forbid. We exercise our freedoms, such as the freedom to wear what we want. What I find really fascinating, though, is that there are certain celebrations where we're allowed to be ourselves. As a culture, we've collectively decided that on Halloween, anyone can dress as they please, so long as it's under the false pretense of make-believe.
You want to borrow your sister's dress? What for?
I want to wear it to the Halloween party.
There are names for boys who go around wearing girls' clothes.
Glen did wear the dress to the Halloween party. He even took first prize.
Back when I thought I was a man, I would experiment with feminine clothing on Halloween. And for example, I would dress as a Playboy bunny purely for laughs. And I would be like, see everyone? Isn't this hilarious? A fellow bro, such as myself, deigning to dress as the weaker sex. Oh, it's been 4 hours already. Well, no, you see, I can't stop now. I'm committing to the bit. Wouldn't it just be so funny if I dressed this way forever, right? Am I right? My fellow bros?
Then one day it wasn't Halloween any longer.
You know, for a movie that's supposedly awful, that line is really effective for me. It lands with a grim thud, like a weight being placed on my chest, because it just reminds me that as a trans person, the only day I can go out and be myself without worrying about being assaulted or attacked is Halloween. And I have to commend Wood, because even after Halloween was over, he would go out as Shirley all the time, though there was at least one incident where Wood was caught cross-dressing by the police. He wore earrings, but he would always take them off and put them in his briefcase. He said, if I ever got caught going home, it would be hell. I got caught once and the police beat me up. The threat of violence is one of society's favorite tactics. It ensures that the outsider stays hidden, too afraid to be themselves in public. But society has other ways of suppressing us besides violence. If we manage to muster up the courage to say what is right, they can always censor us, like what happened to Glen or Glenda. It was a film which was to have discussions with the censors many times. As long as the wrongdoer, the deviant doer, the evildoer, is put down at the end, the film's generally past the censor. In order to even release the film, Wood had to end the picture with Glen, this supposed wrongdoer, being cured of his cross-dressing, as if it needed curing at all. And here's where you may be wondering, well, how do they free Glen of this curse? With some pseudoscience bullshit, of course.
Glen's case was entirely of his mind, brought on by the environment of his early youth.
Then the way I get it, this Glen and the character he created, much as an author creates a character in a book, was invented as a love object to take the place of the love he never received in his early youth through lack of it from his parents.
Exactly.
So how does the doctor cure Glen of this life-threatening condition? The answer should be very obvious. Glen has to graft his alter ego Glenda onto his girlfriend, Barbara, and then view Barbara as every single feminine figure in his life mishmashed together into a slurry of womanhood. See, I told you, it's so simple.
Then you think I can kill this second character by transferring her qualities to Barbara?
Exactly. It's up to you, Barbara. You must take the place, give the love, and accept the facts that Glenda has always accepted. Glen has found his mother, his little sister, his wife, and his Glenda, all in one lovely package. Thus, Glen's case has a happy conclusion. While the movie presents this as a hunky-dory, sunshiny ending, there are some pretty horrifying implications. The dialogue repeatedly states that Glen kills Glenda, and that word choice reminds me that Glen is murdering part of his own identity. Yes, this helped the film get past the censors. It helped this story get told, but at what cost? Now, for all my quibbles and concerns about Glen's ending, the Glending, there is one sublime moment where my concerns melt away. It's when Glen finally reveals his secret to Barbara and asks if she can accept him for who he is. She leans back, leaving us in suspense.
Glen, I don't fully understand this, but maybe together we can work it out.
Barbara handing over the sweater was more iconic, cathartic, and resonant for me than anything directed by Bergman, Tarkovsky, or, God forbid, Lars von fucking Trier. Like, it just boggles my mind that anybody would call Wood the worst filmmaker of all time. Like, are the film bros at it again? Are these the same people who, with their God-given reasons, saw the film and their only main takeaway was guy in dress? How funny. I mean, okay, I get it. Wood is a bad director. His execution is horrible, and his writing is mostly laughable. But in my eyes, no one who gives us that sublime of a moment can be considered the worst filmmaker of all time. I just can't see it. But anyway, with Glen living apparently happily ever after, we move on to our second protagonist, Anne. Like Wood, Anne was also... Halfway through the film, we hear a sudden explosion, its origins unknown. Glen loses consciousness, and the plot of the film evaporates. The audience is tossed deep, deep into the dream. Metaphors and abstractions abound. Barbara's pinned under a giant tree which Glenda is unable to lift, but aha! Glen, the meaty lad, can hoist this hefty load. The woman is free. I was gripping onto my notepad for dear life during this cinematic maelstrom, and I just kept writing literally Satan. Literally Satan shows up several times. No metaphors, no ambiguity, it's just literally Satan. Glorious facial hair and all. I had to imagine myself being the average moviegoer in 53, having recently enjoyed light entertainment like The Bandwagon, Peter Pan, only to be bombarded with these baffling visions. And amidst this chaos, the audience is disoriented further by the inclusion of footage from a completely unrelated film, a pornographic film. The added footage in Glen or Glenda was because you had to have a picture that was at least 70 minutes. And in fact, you couldn't sell Foreign unless it was 90 minutes, because Foreign didn't have a double feature. So now we're watching sex scenes from a different movie with close-ups of Lugosi and Wood thrown in with wild abandon, as if maybe, just maybe, if there's one more close-up, the audience will be convinced that, yes, this is totally the same movie. This belongs here. After this detour through Smutsville, we get back to the dream sequence, where Lugosi serenades us once more.
Tell me, dragon, do you eat little boys? Puppy ducktails and big fat snails?
His deadpan delivery's pretty funny, but what I like about the children's rhymes is that they show us how gender roles are imposed upon us from an early age. When I was alchemically produced, I was concocted from puppy dog tails and snails. Therefore, I had to play with army men, toy trucks, and wear blue. Blue. What a shitty color. I'm kidding. I genuinely love blue. It's one of my favorite colors. But my point still stands that we stifle children's individuality when we force them into rigid definitions of boy and girl. I mean, most children's genders are assumed, and so they're socialized to fulfill every expectation of that gender. Some kids turn out fine, at least on the surface, but others suffer because they were sent down the wrong path. They eventually realize that they were assigned the wrong gender and that maybe their body doesn't match who they are. Which brings us to the film's second protagonist, Anne. Like Ed Wood, Anne was also well decorated for her service in the military and honorably discharged. She had been a soldier, a GI, which we all know stands for gender identifier. But unlike Wood, Anne's not a crossdresser at all. She's a woman, a trans woman. Crossdressers and trans people have different experiences, but in the 1950s they were both lumped together under one word.
The term transvestite is the name given by medical science to those persons who wear the clothing of the opposite sex.
Being transgender was just seen as a more advanced case of transvestism, and imprecise language like this, especially when used by a medical professional, does a disservice to both crossdressers and trans people. And I realize that there may be some watching who are confused about the difference between trans and cross-dressing people. So, what is it that separates the two? Broadly speaking, cross-dressers present themselves in a way that's associated with a different gender from themselves, while trans people present themselves as their own gender. A cross-dresser is a man dressing as a woman, like Glen as Glenda, while Anne is a trans woman dressed like a woman, no crossing at all. But see, that's the simple answer, because in reality, every individual person has their own identity and expression, like me. I'm a trans person. My correct pronouns are she and her. Like Anne, my pronouns are pretty consistent, but other trans people have different pronouns at different times, and still others use several pronouns interchangeably. Not to mention, some crossdressers eventually realize that they're trans, so the truth is really complex. But let's get back to Anne. Anne's portion of the film focuses almost solely on her medical transition. Throughout this whole process, her doctor, Dr. Alton, is an absolute failure. He constantly refers to Anne by her dead name first, and only then uses her actual name. On top of that, he only uses her correct pronouns consistently after her surgery's complete. This puts an extreme emphasis on medical transition, as if that's the only way, an often prohibitively expensive way, that a trans person can be legitimate. The doctor specifically refers to Anne's story as a happy ending made possible through medical science.
But here's the problem, and it's one of many problems. The doctor has the power. They have bestowed upon themselves authority over someone else's body. The doctors and therapists decide who gets the transition and who doesn't.
Then you believe that the Glen of the first story should have the sex change?
In Glen's case, no indeed. Glen would never be happy with a sex change.
Maybe the doctor's right. Maybe Glen would be happier as a crossdresser. But how does the doctor know? What if they're wrong? How can he possibly read Glen's mind and innermost feelings? What if he had denied Anne the right to transition, the right to control her own body?
Trans people who experience dysphoria have a higher rate of suicidality than the rest of the population. That is, when they're pre-transition. If trans people are allowed to transition, they are exponentially less likely to commit suicide, and I will include links to relevant studies in the description below. The point is, if Anne had been denied the right to transition, she may have ended up like Patricia, a character from early in the film who dies of suicide. They leave behind a note that reveals they'd been punished repeatedly by the law, despite the fact that they had done nothing wrong. The note reads,
"The records will tell the story. I was put in jail recently. Why? Because I, a man, was caught on the street wearing women's clothing. This was my 4th arrest for the same act. In life, I must continue wearing them. Therefore, it would only be a matter of time until my next arrest. This is the only way. Let my body rest in death forever in the things I cannot wear in life."
There is hope, however. With trans people, multiple studies have shown that socially transitioning with support of family and friends makes them significantly less likely to attempt suicide. And that support could include using a trans person's pronouns, addressing them by their new name, or including them in the appropriate activities. While a lot of these gestures seem very small and require only a little bit of effort, they can make a trans person's day or brighten up their whole week.
In the film's opening title card, Wood insists his belief that society at large has a duty to show compassion for outcasts. It reads, "You are society, judge ye not."
The title card also claims that the film would be taking no sides, and to me that's a blatant lie. The film definitely takes a side because it has to. This is not an issue you can afford to be in the middle of. When one side of the argument is all cross-dressers are perverts and trans people are all delusional freaks, suddenly the film's position of, maybe these people are deserving of love and compassion like everyone else, suddenly this is seen as taking a side, and detractors could accuse the film of having an agenda, and I admit I agree with them. At many times it is incredibly obvious that Wood is preaching directly through his characters. Take this clip, for instance, where an average Jack, is somehow, he's like this 1950s guy, and he's somehow fully educated about trans people.
Now, here is a guy who wanted to be a girl. Supposing there had been no way to change his sex. That's why I say perhaps society should be a little bit more lenient with them. Maybe society should try to understand them as human beings.
Now, I don't know about you, but that seems like a pretty good suggestion. Wood's characters are often just megaphones by which he can preach his message. And for some people, preachiness is this cardinal sin in writing, but I am not people. What I love, what I cherish in writing is sincerity, especially sincerity fueled by moral righteousness, because I want to feel like the author cares. Like they give a fuck about the world that they live in, that they're spending their precious time to plead with us, beg us to reflect on our actions. Subtlety is seen as a virtue only by those who can afford to be subtle, or by those who wish for a film's message to be so subtle they can just tune it out. Keep your politics out of my entertainment, say the people who benefit the most from complacency. The film is definitely preachy, it absolutely is, but for me it's a message worth preaching.
Earlier, I posed the question, is Glen or Glenda a good film? And my answer is, who cares? What I do know is that this film is worthy of discussion, and that it is invaluable for how it captures the cultural attitudes of its time. Parts of the film still feel modern, while others have aged very poorly, like this portrayal of quote-unquote natives. But despite their many flaws, Wood's films live on today, and I encourage anyone to look into his works. If you're looking for a more complete portrait of Wood, the good and the bad, I'd recommend the book Nightmare of Ecstasy. It's unafraid to delve deep into the darker aspects of his life, such as his alcoholism, or the way he abused his partners, or his paranoid, often racist delusions that consumed him in his final days.
To be honest, I never set out to make such a heavy video. I initially envisioned this as campy fun, like going trick-or-treating with your friends, so I'd like to end this on a better note, with a message to my Glens and Anns out there, the misfits and the oddballs. I thought about you a lot while writing this. Like, what can I do? What can I say to make them smile or laugh? Or how can I remind them that they're not a mistake of nature or some monster? Though, speaking of monster, if you are a monster, you are definitely the cool kind. Perhaps a werewolf like me, or a vampire like Lugosi himself. And the way I like to look at the whole thing is, nobody dresses as Jonathan Harker for Halloween. And with that said, my fellow children of the night, I fear I must depart. That dreaded sun shall soon rise in its chariot. As always, I am your host, Glenda, and no matter what day it is, I am wishing you a very happy Halloween. Thank you. I would like to thank my patrons of the Cryptid Commune. We have a new addition, Big Beezums, along with Alex Harris, Lily Marks, and making a special appearance as Lars von Trier, Nick Padula. I know this was a long video, so I'd like to thank everyone for sticking through with it to the very end. Thank you all for your support, and I hope to see you in the next video.